This lady is the Countess from the third trailer of Path of Exile 2. She's giving off bad vibes.
No exile will stop me!
In this video I will go over a theory that I have been cooking up. The theory that the Countess might not only be bad for us, but also her own son. This is my theory of what might happen over the course of Path of Exile 2's story and how the story will lead us, the Exile, into the endgame. A quick spoiler warning, I may be showing Path of Exile 2 gameplay over the course of this video. If you don't want to see that, feel free to minimize the tab in your browser or flip over your phone. First off, let's briefly talk about the trailers, which gives us an insight into three major characters. Starting off with the Countess herself, which we saw for the first time during the third trailer for Path of Exile 2 at ExileCon 2023. During the monologue, we can hear her saying that the gods caused some devastation. In the meantime, the exile seemed to be captured, and the guard had a sword near the witch's neck. Probably not a good position to be in. The Countess holds herself quite high and looks to be royal, or at least has worked her way up to be seen as such. She clearly must have influence and power to be able to have guards. The second major character is ourselves, the Exile. For Path of Exile 2, we actually don't know much, or at least I try not to look into it. For this video, I will only go off of what they officially told us or have shown in the trailers. I think the Exile in PoE2 is going against the grain once again, and probably overstepped in some way. I mean, otherwise, why is there a rope around our neck? The next trailer was shown during the Gamescom opening night livestream we got in August 2024. This gave us the son of the Countess. Or at least that is what she calls him. We have no real facts if it truly is her son or if she just calls him that. He might also be adopted and isn't technically blood related. During the trailer he didn't say much, but reading between the lines we can assume a few things. He clearly wants to satisfy the Countess's needs for power. He wants to become whatever she thinks is needed to fulfill her own plan. But the Countess also poses leading questions, which the son agrees to. Questions like, are you ready to sacrifice? Sacrifice everything to become the savior. We see him put on a helmet to become the savior, as the Countess describes. She also poses the question if he is ready to sweep aside this world and build it anew. At first I thought this might be a not so subtle way of describing genocide, but this would involve types of people, like a specific background, race, or religion. There are no indications that she wants to use her own son to kill a lot of people of the same tribe, like the Karui, or maybe every Templar for hiding secrets. More on that in a bit. On the other side, maybe she means tabula rasa, sweeping aside everything that is in the past and imperfect by making a blank slate. Either way, we'll find out more during our first playthrough of Path of Exile 2. Those were the three major characters, but just like how the Templars lied, so did I. There is one more character, or should I say entity, the Scourge. I technically do not have facts that it is the Scourge, but we have had huge hints in some Path of Exile expansions, and the visual style of it is partially repeated in the trailers for Path of Exile 2. For example, the red tentacles, which can be seen in the second trailer, but more importantly, a shadow of them in the third trailer when the sun puts on the helmet. So for the sake of the video, I will assume it is the Scourge, which is not a good thing. This might be a bit heavy if you haven't paid attention to the lore, but the Scourge are demons. The Scourge demons come from a different reality though. In short, the Scourge took over the Beyond demons which Path of Exile 1 had previously. The High Templars knew about the Scourge, but didn't tell the populace. More importantly, as we know from the Scourge expansion itself, those demons want to break into our reality, which is the Rayclast we play on. After the Forbidden Sanctum was opened by Divinia and we exiles snooped around a bit, we found out quite a bit. We also found Lycia, who became the herald of the Scourge. Somehow a human was able to communicate to the Scourge, specifically Baydat. Baydat is the leader of the Pale Demons, which is one of 3 factions. He's also the only demon, as far as we know, who can communicate. The other 2 can probably communicate too, but they might sound like this. Baydat gave Lycia immortality, but this locked her into the Sanctum. Slight spoiler here, Lycia is the final boss of the Forbidden Sanctum, and clearly physically transforms, which we can assume means she gains power from the Scourge or Baydat directly. Now this is important because that means a human can absorb the power, or maybe it just corrupts them. This was the first time we saw something like this happen, and the second time was with the sun. The sun seems to look human when he puts on the helmet, but then, a shot later, we see his eyes and grey skin, similar to Lycia after she transformed. And in the following shot, we see him rise from below and his head looks quite deformed. It clearly isn't a helmet and looks more like bulbous flesh enveloping his head, or maybe that is his head now. Clearly, he is transforming in some way by what I assume is the Scourge. I sadly have to say, I'm not quite sure what happened between the 20 years from Path of Exile 1 and 2. The Countess mentions the gods who did all this. But what did they do, and which gods is she talking about? We know that gods are a thing since Path of Exile 1. We, the Exile, killed many of them, from Tukohama to Solaris and Lunaris. Many have died by our hands for the sake of power. When the trailer played and I heard gods, I perked up and thought it might be the voice that we hear during the delirium. Or could it be the god that we have heard about from Oshabi since the Harvest expansion? My first theory was about the current endgame story of Path of Exile 1, which could have been the catalyst for the Countess's actions. Imagine creatures beyond your wildest nightmares flood out from the Atlas and overrun Rayclast. If the Exile and the Maven lose the fight against the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds, they could most likely break out of the Atlas in the next 20 years and cause devastation. But the Countess said the word divine. The Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds aren't divine. They are eldritch beings, which I assume some people in the populace would know and so would the Countess. So that theory is down the drain. Who is left that is divine destroys Oriath and brings the Countess to offer her own son to use the power of the Scourge to sweep aside this world. Could she mean someone who is quite tall, might be a man, maybe floats in the air and glows like a light bulb? Does she mean Innocence? Innocence, or as he is also known before ascending to godhood, Mexarius, the first High Templar, fought with his brother Sin against Kitava and thus saved humanity. The Exile also did something, I think. Just a tiny footnote in the history books. After that fight in Act 10 of Path of Exile 1, Innocence then left Oriath and wanted to return later, when he meditated under a tree or something. But this is where I will stop with this theory, because I cannot imagine Innocence coming back and destroying Oriath. So with this out of the way, I want to focus on the Countess, the son, and what leads us into the endgame. Currently in Path of Exile 1, the endgame storyline is, I think, quite disconnected. It's difficult to make it all work, which makes sense for a game that had multiple endgame expansions that continues to push the story along. But with Path of Exile 2, they can write a story that leads the Exile and thus the player into the endgame smoothly. The endgame, which is of course the Atlas, in which you'll spend thousands of hours grinding for an upgrade that gives you 1% more damage. Jokes aside, I think the endgame storyline needs to properly connect to the overall story we have in the 6 acts in Path of Exile 2, or else some people might jump off, which would be bad for a game that is meant to be played for a long time. So far, I laid the groundwork for the first 2/3 of this video, so my theory hopefully has some ground to stand on. Starting off, I think the Countess will use her own son to be a vessel of power to get what she wants. My guess is that she got into contact with the Scourge, and specifically Baydat, who we know can communicate. This may have caused the helmet to have some connection to the Scourge, which she then gives to her son. The son most likely doesn't know or even realize the effect of the helmet before it's too late. So she clearly knows what that helmet might do and what it might cost her. It will most likely cost her her own son. But she is willing to do that to give this world a new rebirth. Over the course of the story, I can imagine that the Exile slowly pushes the son to his breaking point over multiple battles. But as the power-hungry exiles that we are, we'll most likely win each time. During a battle against the son, he might beg for the Countess's assistance, like a child crying for his mother. But as we know, she is totally okay with using demon power to corrupt her own son for her own benefits. She most likely is going to betray him and leave him to die. This may cause the son to realize that she isn't a great mother and shouldn't be trusted. The result might give us another piety-like moment from Path of Exile 1. Someone who wants to be redeemed for the bad that the person has caused. This will push the story further along into the final act with the goal of catching the Countess once and for all, and having the son be the Exile's right hand. Sadly, I doubt that the son will survive, but the Countess might. After the Countess has used all her connections in Rayclast to protect herself from the Exile and the son, I can see the Sun using his last breath to get to the Countess and finally stop her. But I doubt she didn't thought ahead, thus stopping him and causing the Sun to die in vain. Now the Countess should be weak and ready to be stopped by our own hands. Unfortunately, she clearly has a big network both on Rayclast but also in another reality. She might be able to escape into the Atlas either by using a map device, which 20 years after Path of Exile 1 might be fairly common, or due to her connection with the Scourge being stronger than ever, maybe Baydat pulls her into the Beyond and saves her. Having fought the Sun over multiple acts and hours in the game, and having seen how ruthless the Countess might be, this will light a fire inside us and drives us to stop her. This is how the endgame will start, making the Exile want to explore the Atlas to find the Countess and stop her in her goal to sweep aside Rayclast. The same Rayclast we have played on during the 6 acts, and we probably started to enjoy this wretched continent, thus bringing more players into the endgame of Path of Exile 2, making them want to grind for that 1% more damage, and finishing the goal of stopping the Countess once and for all. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, subscribe, and don't forget to stay hydrated, gamers.